Welcome back, everybody, to the Aurora Show. We're going to dive into Capricorn risings today. So following in our journey of story arcing, right, we come to Capricorn and, something very interesting, right, as I've talked about with ancient rulers versus modern rulership and co-rulership, it does change the essence of the archetypes, right? In many ways, archetypes are always evolving. And so that is one of the reasons why I'm sure if we were to, look back into more ancient interpretations of certain signs, right? For instance, Scorpio, right? Before its co-rulership of Pluto, Scorpio might have carried a little bit of a different archetype when it was just ruled by Mars. That's a big possibility, right? Ceres used to be a planet. There was about a 50-year stretch where Ceres was actually named a planet. I believe she ruled Virgo, if I'm not mistaken. So Virgo might have taken on a different archetype during that time, right? Pisces has a modern ruler of Neptune, but an ancient ruler of Jupiter, right? Aquarius has an ancient ruler of Saturn being shared with Capricorn, but a modern ruler of Aquarius. So we have to realize that archetypes do evolve based on the consciousness, based on associations we have with planets and rulerships and domiciles and all of these things, right? Capricorn risings. Now, Capricorn has always been ruled by Saturn, is still ruled by Saturn, but I wanted to make a different kind of connection here. When they took the original calendar, so I think the original calendar probably anciently was either a lunar calendar or a solar calendar, right? There's two ways to track it, right? You're tracking the movements of the sun. I don't know when they would have discovered, right, that the sun takes approximately 30 days to go through a sign. And that's, kind of where the month thing comes from, 30-day months. But at the same time, the moon was much easier to track as a lunar calendar because the moon, it's very clear that the moon has gone through a full phase, right, when it reaches the full moon. Right? And that's typically a 28-day cycle, although that can extend to 30 days as well. So we either had mainly a lunar calendar or possibly a solar calendar, right? And then somewhere down the line, we had the Julian calendar, which was probably more accurate. And then, of course, the Gregorian calendar took over. So all of a sudden, we have months with odd days. We have fucking leap years. They changed the new year. So astrologically speaking, the new year is the spring equinox on March 21st. However, I think in some Celtic traditions and in pagan traditions, the 1st of April was like officially the new year kind of thing. And I believe that's where the lore around April Fool's Day comes in. Because when they changed the new year to be January 1st, they would call, the original indigenous people fools for celebrating the new year on April 1st. So I believe that that's where the lore comes in about April Fool's Day. It was like basically trying to mock and make fun of people that still followed the traditional calendar, right? So I think in a lot of ways, Capricorn has taken on a new archetype because for the last, 1,000 years, I think it is, maybe a little longer than that we've had the Gregorian calendar. We celebrate the beginning of the year on January 1st, which is Capricorn season. So I'm thinking about that because with a rulership of Saturn, right? So if you're a Capricorn rising, your ruling planet is Saturn. Now, Saturn is known as a malefic. So is Mars. And again, we take a lot of this with a grain of salt because the ancient astrologers were going off the knowledge that they had, right? So the benefics, funny enough, are the feminine signs, or the feminine planets, but I digress. And that the very masculine signs were malefic or bad, which is Mars and Saturn. Now, in modern times, we would include Pluto absolutely as a malefic because he is, right? So what they would traditionally say is that a malefic is going to bring challenges, but also malefics have a very strong, intense energy. So there is the possibility for conquering things, achieving things in a very big way. Those kind of things can come with malefics, but there is a kind of underlying sinister nature to them. Now, again, we take this with a grain of salt because I don't believe that any planet is sinister in nature. It's maybe how human beings have interpreted it or how we've embodied it that gives it that archetype. Whereas the benefics, such as Venus and Jupiter, were always about blessings. They were about good things, positive things, right? So I'm just thinking about it because, Saturn is definitely a hardcore guy. And Saturn is about karma, but I think that's also a human, maybe a human theory, a human idea. Like, does karma exist in upper dimensions or is it called something else, right? But our idea of karma, right, is basically that something is unfinished. We have not completed something. Something is undone. Something is unbalanced. Lessons have not been learned, right? So there's something about Saturn that forces completion. It's a very strong force of, and when Saturn transits and obviously where it is in your chart, this is where something was unfinished. Something needed to be completed. A lesson needed to be learned. Something needed to be mastered, right? And that can appear in our life in different forms. But to have a rulership of Saturn, right? So for Capricorn risings, it gives me the feeling that you've come into this life with something very much weighing heavy on the soul. Like something about this incarnation is you are meant to complete something. You're meant to finish something. You're meant to master something, right? Like learn the lesson. And the thing about Saturn that I think a lot of people don't talk about, because I have a strong Saturn, like Saturn's in its domicile of Capricorn. I have a Capricorn stellium. So I have a lot of respect for Saturn. I would say I actually carry a lot of Saturnian energy, and I have a lot of respect for Saturn. And I understand Saturn in this way of like, it is about respect, right? It's about respecting boundaries. It's about respecting that there are consequences to actions. It's about integrity, right? When we need to correct something, right? We need to have the integrity to take accountability for it, take responsibility for it. When we know that there's something we need to master, we need to complete, we need to put in the effort. Don't half-ass it. Don't be lazy. Don't try to avoid it. Like literally just get to work and do it. And the thing about Saturn is he does give rewards. So, all the planets in ancient Hellenistic astrology were binary systems, right? The sun and the moon, Venus and Mars, Jupiter and Saturn. Mercury was kind of a binary star within himself. He has two sides, right? He, she, it has two sides. So Jupiter being the planet of blessings and expansion and good luck is kind of the binary partner of Saturn. So we can't really say that Saturn would have no beneficial energy, but there's a balance, right? If Jupiter's expansion, Saturn is restraint. Saturn is knowing when to stop. Jupiter is knowing when to keep going, right? If Jupiter is about more, Saturn is when you need to have less, when you need to minimize, right? So there's a curbing effect with Saturn, but he does bring blessings if you can complete the lesson. Like he will reward you for your hard work. Now, with the whole Gregorian calendar and the new year being designated in the middle of Capricorn season, of course, a lot of us know that doesn't really make sense. Capricorn is also not an energy that you start something with. Like, it's the mountain goat. You don't start anything in Capricorn. Capricorn is when you have been in the long haul. You have persevered. You have done the work. You have mastered. You have trained. You have overcome the challenges. And Capricorn is where you kind of reach the top of the mountain. You have succeeded. You have achieved. You have come to a milestone, right? And that is Capricorn. So, but having the new year starting Capricorn, I think has changed the archetype a little bit to where Capricorn feels like it's trying to begin something. And maybe for you Capricorn risings, if you can relate to this, maybe you constantly feel like you have to start something, like you have to keep starting things, right? And that's actually not the archetype here. Capricorn is about the follow through. It's not about the start of anything. It is about the follow through, the completion, the consistency, right? Capricorn is the final cardinal sign. You have Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. Capricorn is finality of the project. It is finality of the contract. It is completion of the soul lesson. It is the fulfillment and the achievement of what you've set out for. It's not the starting. So I don't know, maybe you guys can relate to this if you're a Capricorn rising. If you feel like you're always starting things, but never really finishing them, never really getting to kind of bring them into fruition, maybe it's just because the archetype has been kind of interfered with. You are about the long haul. You are about really figuring out what is the soul lesson I'm here to master, and you stick with it. You stick with it until you get it, until you succeed at it, and you don't stop before them. Okay, you just keep at it. So Capricorn risings, your first house ruled by Capricorn. So obviously Saturn's your rulership. So this is going to tell you what you're here to master, where you need to follow through, what the lesson is, right? There's a little bit of a karmic energy here with Capricorn risings. And with your first house of Capricorn, you emanate strong boundaries for one, because Saturn is about boundaries. Now, the irony, as we'll get to the seventh house of Cancer, you really crave very vulnerable connections and relationships, and like emotional intimacy, and really engaging with people from the heart. But your aura gives off this, like, you stay here, I'm here, don't cross my boundaries. So that's a little dichotomy, but you do have an aura of authority. So this is also where you have to be careful, right? Your aura gives off authority. You are kind of very karmic, similar to my Libra risings, because Saturn does exalt in Libra. So as I said with that, Libra risings, we kind of carry this natural karmic energy where we are always balancing the scales wherever we go. So we can bring karmic things to others as well, because we give them a mirror, right? Whereas Capricorn is kind of this aura of authority, integrity, and there is that karmic nature. And so you kind of, in a similar fashion, want to make sure that everyone is completing their contracts. Everyone's completing their lessons, not just you, everybody, right? And that era of authority, people will really listen to you. You kind of have that boss energy. And so you have to make sure that you are leading by example in the correct way, right? Now, your second house, right? So you see yourself as this very strong, resilient person who has to go through a lot. Saturnian people can be under a lot of pressure. They can handle a lot before they ever crack. So you have this aura that is extremely resilient and extremely strong. And I guess this kind of goes to that constant need to be mastering something, right? Now, that second house of self-worth, money, income, manifestation, resources is in Aquarius. So these people are actually quite rebellious when it comes to the way in which they use their effort, you know, their work ethic, their effort, their discipline, their authority, right? They only want to put that into things that they feel have some sort of bigger vision, right? And Aquarius second house, you might make money in the most kind of out of the box ways. that aren't traditional. You know, you might find, we can see with some of my examples as well, a lot of these people take certain tracks that are very untraditional, and they do have a way of like kind of breaking the mold in terms of how they have resources, how they make income, and their self-worth is very interesting because in the sign of Aquarius, the self-worth is there's a little detachment there. Like they almost don't really care how people see them. Right? They're like, listen, I came in with a heavy karmic load. I could care less what you think about it, kind of thing. Now, the only other thing they have to be careful of is, again, I think part of the karmic energy here with Capricorn is that in its lower, Capricorn can be the one who misuses their power. They can be very authoritarian, very militant, very controlling and dominating of others. So in its lowest form, this is where we get the shadows of Capricorn, which is like our government, big corporations, institutions and structures that basically are very greedy. They put profit over people. All they care about is status and power and achievement, and they don't give a fuck about anything else. That is the shadow of Capricorn, right? So I would say you guys do have to do something humanitarian. Okay, it's like there really does need to be this focus on what can I do for humanity? How can I give back? Because you have this powerful aura where you will succeed. You can become in a very high status, a very high ranking, very high achievement. But that second house of Aquarius, remember anciently, Aquarius is also ruled by Saturn. There will be karma for greed, putting money over people, misusing finances, scamming people, basically not having any sort of humanitarian morality in how you make money and how you spend it, right? And that self-worth is really going to get bolstered here from the fact that you are using your power for good, right? Because Saturn, even though it's a malefic, it is powerful, right? Now, your third house of communication, interestingly, is in Pisces. So, you know, you guys are very divinely guided. And I would say you might not always feel that way, but you're very divinely guided because you're almost like the dark horse, if you will. Like you're coming in as someone who knows the heavy weight of karma, who carries a little bit of a heavy burden energetically, but really has such a big role in this particular life, which is to succeed and to fulfill that contract, to learn that lesson, to receive the blessings of Saturn once you do that, which Saturn does bless through power, authority, being in a position of, you know, being in charge, if you will, and kind of carrying this natural strength in which other people innately kind of follow and look to, right? And so you guys are very divinely guided though, because the dark horse is kind of a, you know, a wild card, if you will. And so that Pisces third house, one thing is listen to your intuition. You are actually extremely intuitive here and really have this way of kind of perceiving things that in the shadow, sometimes you can misperceive a lot of things. Like you can have a lot of miscommunications with people. Like you're not understanding what they're saying. They're not understanding what you're saying. There can be a lot of fogginess and misperception around reality. So that is something that you have to kind of be careful of. And I think that this ties back to the first house of Capricorn, where sometimes your natural state and that auric field feels a little heavy. It feels like it's a little over serious. There's a heavy weight here. It could just feel like you're always carrying a lot. And so that Pisces second house is almost like a whimsical escape. Fantasy, fantasizing, or just in general kind of like disassociating from reality, right? Like not really seeing reality for what it is, because in a way, You just need to live in the whimsical because it always feels a bit heavy. Utilize this to the higher and not for the lower, okay? This can come through manipulation, lower of Pisces, like manipulative communications, right? Things like that. You want to use this in the higher that one, you actually have a really creative voice. You also can deeply reach people through empathy, through compassion. This can be through music. A lot of Capricorn risings might seek music or art as an expression for themselves. But beyond that, you are a very intuitive person, and you need to cultivate and hone that intuitiveness that's going to come through that third house, okay? Fourth house, first angular house, home and family, where you come from, the core of self, how you grew up, is in Aries. This links, again, to the first house of that there's a heavy burden to bear. And a lot of this might come through the childhood. A lot of this might come through your early life and growing up, or even beyond that, right? Aries is volatile, okay? Aries is at its lower, it's conflict, it's aggression. It is, even though Scorpio tends to be what we associate with death, remember that Mars rules both Aries and Scorpio. So if Scorpio is associated with death, so is Aries, okay? I think Aries is more of sudden death, right? Like some unexpected death, whereas Scorpio, I think it's more of like, it is the process of death itself, the process of accepting death, grieving it, right? And understanding it. And Aries can be very quick death, right? It can also be accidents, so maybe you grew up and you were always getting hurt, with an Aries fourth house. Maybe you were like a wild child and you were kind of always hurting yourself and, falling off things and breaking a bone maybe, or whatever. Maybe there was a lot of conflict in the home between you and your parents, between both parents. Maybe it was between other siblings and the parents, but you kind of grew up in this very combative environment, right? And this can really link back to the first house, where it feels like a very heavy burden, for one. And for two, this is why you have very strong boundaries. You keep people at a distance, and you don't really share with others what you're going through, right? That fourth house of the internal self, the emotional body. It almost feels to you like you have to deal with everything yourself. But really, that seventh house of Cancer is looking for that emotional support. But at the core within yourself, you're like, I've got it, I'll deal with it, don't worry about it. But really, you need that emotional support. And it's okay, you deserve emotional support, right? Second house Aquarius, there can be a large detachment there. You have to let people in to support you. You have to share what you're going through and how you're feeling. Again, as long as you don't fall victim to the Pisces third house, which can be manipulation, emotional manipulation through words. It can be like purposely twisting things, victim consciousness, just like play. That will not serve you. Okay, do not play the victim, but at the same time, you don't need to carry the weight by yourself. You can be autonomous and receive support at the same time. Okay, use that Pisces third house for its highest. Okay. But yeah, that fourth house is like, there's just something volatile there. Now in the higher, let's say you didn't grow up with conflict or a sudden death in the family or, volatility. There could have just been, there's in some way, there's a lot going on at home. It just feels like something's always happening here. There's a lot of energy. Maybe, you always just felt like you had to be going. You don't really know how to rest. You don't know how to just sit with yourself. Again, you feel like you always need to be starting something, going, doing, being productive, and that is a good thing in some ways, right? It's a good thing because you're so driven. You're so autonomous. You're such a strong being. But there needs to be balance here, right? And this leads us to the fifth house of your joy and your personal expression. This is going to be in the sign of Taurus. So your joy is actually in relaxation, right? If anyone loves a good relaxation, it's Taurus, okay? Taurus is also comfort, beauty, nature. You might find really driven to learn how to be. You know, that part of your creative expression could actually be through, maybe you love to grow things. Maybe, you know, Taurus is really known also for food. Like maybe you love cooking. You know, Cancer 7th house, maybe you love cooking for others, right? That's kind of your love language. You need to express your joy and your creativity through something physical, something with your hands, okay? Taurus is like hands in the dirt, you know, making something. It could be pottery, it could be growing, it could be gardening, it could be cooking. You know, it could be painting, it could be drawing, but do something physical as part of your creative expression. And also realize that a lot of your joy is actually going to come from just chilling, finding joy and relaxation, finding joy in the simplicity of life and just being, right? Just being in the body, being fulfilled, you know, that it's a very sensual placement. So really kind of engaging the five senses is just a really beautiful thing that I think is going to be very healing for that inner child in the 5th house, okay? Capricorn is the daddy of the zodiac. You need to heal that inner child of the 5th house. Now the 6th house, your health and wellness, your daily routines, your work, Gemini. Kind of interesting, right? Again, I think that authority really comes out with speaking. So a lot of Capricorn risings, your Gemini 6th house also does require that you have to mix up your daily routine. Okay. This takes us back to the 1st house again. Saturn is so disciplined and so structured, right? 4th house Aries, you always feel like you need to be on. You need to have some flexibility in your day-to-day life, in your routine, in your job, right? It's funny because we think of Capricorn risings and we think Capricorn, the CEO, the boss, right? The government official, the person in charge. Like there's an air of authority here. But the irony here is that being in a place of authority all the time is actually super draining for you. It actually will suck your joy. You are excellent at discipline. You're excellent at structure and discipline and hard work. What's going to happen though is your health and wellness will suffer when you don't have enough mental stimulation for one, right? And mental stimulation can be from talking to people, socializing, right? It can be from taking some time to read a book or expressing yourself verbally in some way, right? But I think overall, the versatility of the 6th house, it requires change. A Gemini 6th house can't do the same thing every single day. They're going to get bored. They're going to get fried out. They need a little bit of spontaneity, a little bit of stimulation, okay? And that's going to be important. If your health and wellness starts to suffer, it might start to occur in the realm of Gemini, which could be the shoulders, the arms. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word arms. Hands. Aries 4th house could be like you cut your hand, right? Or you hurt your shoulder, you hurt your arms, the lungs, trouble breathing, sinus infections, colds, things like that. So you need to cultivate a daily routine that allows for some flexibility and stimulation. Okay. You can't be on all the time. Okay. Now, this leads us to your 7th house, the way that other people are actually perceiving you, the way you're interacting with others, and also the type of relationship contracts that are the most suited for you to learn more about yourself. Cancer. So the irony is kind of healing that relationship, especially with the mother, because the mother rules the 4th house where you have Aries. So there's some sort of conflict with the mother here. And this can be because the Capricorn rising is the daddy. It's more of a father figure. It's more of the tough love, the structure, the integrity, right? And so your 4th house where we, ideally are supposed to be receiving that nurturing, right? That motherly connection, the nurturing, the self-love is a little combative. It's a little overpowering, right? So you might have felt overpowered by your mother. Maybe you felt like you weren't allowed to come into your own autonomy. But there's a wound there. instead of like receiving the love or the nurturing, maybe you received the militantness. Maybe you were yelled at and screamed at, or there was just always some sort of chaos. You didn't learn how to relax. You have no idea. You have no chill. You have no idea how to relax. This is very similar, again, to Libra risings. We have a lot in common because we have that Capricorn fourth house, okay? There was no nurturing involved. There was just like, hey, what are you doing? Are you doing your chores? Are you achieving enough? Are you working hard enough? Are you succeeding? Like, we just didn't grow up in this like overly nurturing state, right? And we have to heal that. So your seventh house of relationships, one thing I want you to watch out for, especially for my masculine Capricorn risings, please, 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 for the love of God, do not try to make your partner your mother. Okay, this is the worst situation that you can put another woman in, is that you want her to mother you because of the mothering you didn't receive. Please, please, please do not do that. Okay, she is not responsible for your emotional healing. She is not your mom. She cannot be your mom. You have to heal the mother wound here. And that means you have to learn how to nurture yourself and how to nurture others. You have to learn how to open up emotionally. You have to learn how to communicate your feelings. You have to learn how to feel your feelings. And a lot of this is going to come through relationships, right? So what you can learn best through relationships is how to cultivate that sense of care, nurturing, and softness, which can really help you understand more about yourself in that it's, you can have both. You can be structured. You can have strong boundaries. You can be disciplined. And you can also be loving and open and soft and nurturing. And those two things can coexist, right? Now for my feminine, who are Capricorn risings, please, please, please do not attract relationships in which you have to become the mother. Okay, so the ideal here is that you find partners that can be co-parents, okay? Literally and figuratively, right? I think Capricorn risings actually might really desire relationships and things where there is a sense of family involved. So maybe that's you have children yourself, or you marry someone who already has children. But there is a love of family here. I think they really desire family. In terms of relationships, though, you want to have someone who is a co-parent, right? In the symbolic sense, and not someone you have to be the parent of. Okay, you've done enough of that in your life. You want equality, and you really want emotional relationships in which you feel safe to be vulnerable, and that's going to be really, really important for your healing. And then this leads to the 8th house, where this is where things lie hidden, right? The 8th house is our energetic body. It's the psyche. It's where all things lie. And this is going to be in the sign of Leo. Okay. Now, as in every video I've said, there is something deep to uncover within the 8th house, okay? It's not hidden like the 12th house. We actually know that it's there. It's just suppressed. It's very suppressed, sometimes denied, sometimes pushed aside, but we know it's there. It doesn't escape us, right? And so there's things about the 8th house where we just have to really dive into them. We have to do the shadow work of the 8th house so that we can bring all of those suppressed, denied parts of ourselves into integration, and we become very empowered and very whole, right? So Leo in the 8th house, you secretly are actually very happy people. You actually have a lot of light to bring to the world, joy and optimism. Leo is insanely creative. I think you guys are real creatives, and that really wants to come out and come through. I think creativity can heal you in many ways. There's this natural joy and kind of exuberance for life, but it may be very, very suppressed because, again, we always go back to the first house. That Saturn energy is heavy. It wants you to be stoic. It wants you to keep everything together, hold it together. Do not cry, do not crumble, whatever is going, it's like when you feel like you can't take anything more, something else happens and you're like, all right, I guess I'm going to deal with that too. It almost makes you numb. It makes you numb, and it makes you think that if you just keep working harder and you just keep, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps that you're going to succeed, right? And for some of you, that might be the case. We need to look at the Saturn placement to know what you're really here to master. But I think that you guys have such a hidden depth of light and joy and an actual love of life. Please let that out. Please. Like, it comes from such a real place, because when you know what it's like to deeply suffer, you also know what real joy feels like, and you have real joy to bring. Now, of course, we need to move through the wounds of this. We need to uncover the layers in the 8th house to let that light out, right? So you might have to deal with like your blocks of pessimism, your blocks of pessimism and like lack of joy and maybe over seriousness. Now, also some of the shadows, which of course we always have to talk about, arrogance. Deep, deep arrogance lies with 8th house of Leo. And that is because as a Capricorn rising, you believe that you work harder than everybody else, that you carry a load that nobody else carries. And in some ways, that is true. In some ways. But in other ways, I have to be honest with every sign, right? With all these story arcs, we all have to be honest with ourselves about where we're not seeing things clearly, right? Pisces 3rd house, you sometimes don't see things clearly. You might have this perception that you work harder than everybody else. You carry a much bigger load, like you do more. And that's actually not reality, because part of your lesson in this life, probably from previous lives, was you did take a shortcut. You were lazy. You did half-ass. You did manipulate. You did really not learn the lesson. You really didn't do something in integrity. So this is every archetype, right? Every rising sign in our story arc, we all have a karma to bear. Okay. We all are coming in with something that we must deal with and heal. And for you guys, it's going to be arrogance. You need to bring that light and that joy that is so deeply powerful in you, this deep creative essence, but do not go into arrogance. It will be the death of everything great that you're trying to build. Okay. 9th house, your expansion, your seeking, your higher learning, where you start really connecting to your sense of kind of spirituality and your greater purpose, right? 9th house is going to be ruled by Virgo. So you guys can really master your crafts. I think that you guys are seeking. Immediately I heard seeking repentance because Virgo is, right, that sign of purification. It's bringing something down to its virgin state, if you will. Again, this goes with Saturn as a malefic. In tarot, for instance, Capricorn rules the devil card. Again, I don't always agree with all these associations. I think every sign has a shadow. Every placement has a shadow, and we would be absolutely out of our minds to think that only certain placements and certain things represent bad and the other ones are good, right? There is ego in everything. And I think Capricorn, again, I have a lot of respect for Saturn and for Capricorn. And I think that it gets a really bad rap as like the ego, the devil, right? The malefic, the negative. And again, in ancient astrology, this could have been the case, but a lot of times this is because of how humans are embodying these archetypes, not because of the archetypes themselves. The stars are not inherently evil, but the way you express them might be. And so you might see a pattern, right? And in astrology, it is all about pattern recognition. So it is quite likely that through pattern recognition, we would start to see that a lot of these maybe lower traits that I mentioned, right? Of greed, misuse of power, right? Capricorn can be the person who kind of makes everybody work for them, right? Like slave labor type of thing, right? There can be that essence. Do I think that all Capricorns are that way? No. Do I think that Capricorn as an archetype itself is that way? No. I don't. I think that, unfortunately, through hijacking of planets like Saturn, which Saturn was one of the most heavily hijacked planets in the solar system, and that is because Saturn has an association to time. And we all know the dark likes to control time. So a lot of the things we talk about, like Earth being in quarantine, we got locked into linear time. There's a lot of theories that we've essentially just been living in a karmic time loop, right? Like, and this is why we're like stuck in the incarnation loop. And, you know, there's a lot of different theories. I can't say for sure what theories are all true or not true, but what I can say for sure is Saturn was hijacked and was misused to kind of lock us into a karmic loop, yes, and to lock us into linear time. And this is, I believe, why Saturn has come to represent enslavement. And like all this negative energy is probably because of that hijack. Do I think that Saturn in his true nature is like that? Absolutely not. And so I think what is special about Capricorn risings is this. If you guys can master the lesson, you are such a big piece of the puzzle in helping humanity break out of its own enslavement, helping us break out of these karmic loops and this linear time. So yes, do you have a heavier contract than most? Absolutely. But only you can do it. Only you are the one who can assist with this particular archetype, right? We're all taking on something. And this is what you guys are taking on. So that 9th house in Virgo, I just immediately heard like seeking repentance, right? You are essentially seeking to be purified back to your natural state, because I think there's a lot of guilt here. There's a lot of like, it's illusionary. It's like a psyop. It's been brainwashed into us about this archetype. You carry this guilt and shame that you are bad, that you are a sinner, that you, the devil card, right? Like that there is something bad about you. And I think what you'll find is if you embrace that 9th house is definitely to learn about healing, natural healing, cleansing, right? And when we talk about higher knowledge in the 9th house, I think you guys would do really well in terms of learning about herbs, right? 5th house Taurus. Like I actually think you guys are excellent with restoring this like naturalness in terms of our connection with the earth and herbs and crystals and the body. But also to realize that it's really this that has to be cleansed. It's your perspective that has to be cleansed. You have to forgive yourself. You have to come to the conclusion that you have already been purified, that you are in a pure state. Again, this is the opposing house of that Pisces 3rd house. There's fogginess in that 3rd house, right? This can lead to delusions. But if you can zoom out and see very, very clearly that it's about what you believe, if you can cleanse your belief systems, excellent. And in a way, you're helping to purify the collective mind, right? Of all these shadow archetypes and maybe this idea of, karmic loops. And there's something there. You could be great teachers. Virgo is so precise. The 9th house is about passing on the wisdom. And again, Capricorn 1st house, you are the example. You are great teachers. And I think you should teach what you know and how you've gone about it and your knowledge and your wisdom. Now, this leads to our 10th house, which is ruled by Capricorn, of your ultimate purpose, your achievements, where you feel a sense of a mission here to accomplish, right? Libra, justice. By you guys completing your contracts, which again, you want to look at that Saturn placement, you are restoring harmony and justice to the world. It's as simple as that. Also, 10th house of Libra, good relationships, especially in your career, because Capricorn's very career oriented. If you can keep good relationships, be in integrity, right? You will have great success. This is part of when I said you need to allow help and support, right? Because that 4th house of your inner core self, your sense of home, your sense of family, your sense of ancestral connection is in Aries. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of support there. It feels like that's all you. You have to take that on. Same as the 1st house. The 7th house is the first time you open up to accepting some sort of emotional support, right? And the 10th house in your purpose, in your career, in your mission, Libra, partnerships, collaborations. You will have good karma in having good relationships, good support, good contracts in fulfilling that purpose, in fulfilling that mission that you want to achieve, right? And so that is one benefit of that as well, right? It is to lean upon good partnerships. 11th house of where you make your impact on the world, your piece of the collective consciousness, what you bring to the group, right? How you kind of impact the world. This is going to be in Scorpio. What'd I tell ya? You are here to deeply cleanse the collective shadows. Scorpio is an alchemist. The 11th house is humanity. You are here to correct the abuse, the darkness, the hidden stuff that has affected humanity. This is why it feels so heavy. But I'm telling you, you wouldn't have come in with a Capricorn rising if you couldn't handle it. But you need to alchemize that. Okay? The shadow work that you do is for the greater good. It is your impact on humanity, the more shadow work you do. Now, again, it might also seem that because the 11th house is where we attract attention from the world, right? So it can also seem that sometimes everybody's kind of projecting a lot onto you, maybe your friends, maybe your social circle, like you kind of seem like you're the bad seed or the bad apple, right? And sometimes you might be playing that archetype out. But keep doing the shadow work and recognize that it is for the collective consciousness and it's really not a personal thing. This leads us to the 12th house of your subconscious, where you do really need to integrate this, is Sagittarius. There's a hidden part of you that is a wild child, okay? Sagittarius, they are wild child, okay? They are boundless. They want adventure. They want freedom. If Capricorn is the fucking fence, Sagittarius is the horse that is jumping over that fence, okay? They want no restraint. Remember, they're ruled by Jupiter. No restraint, no rules, no boundaries, right? And so there's this energy of, it's very subconscious, but there's a wild child in there. There's someone who wants total freedom, adventure. They just want to dive into life and be spontaneous and, kind of just engage the world. But what happens is because it's so hidden, and if it's not integrated properly, what's going to happen is you're going to get this kind of dual personality where people are relying on you, right? This Capricorn first house, people are relying on you to be the example, to fucking break the karmic loops, to do things correctly. They are looking at you to be the example. But when that 12th house isn't integrated, you're kind of then inconsistent. People can't rely on you, right? You don't have boundaries. You don't have restraint. You don't have discipline, and you're just all over the fucking place, right? And so there's that part of the 12th, and if it can be integrated, this will be great, because Sagittarius has that natural optimism and lightness about life. They find humor in the hero's journey. They find humor in it all. Okay, that this is why they're so essential. Sagittarius as an archetype to us is like, it is the funniness, it is the paradox of the human experience. It is to laugh at the absurdity of the fact that we are source beings in these little human bodies, like playing out all these roles. Like Sagittarius thinks that's hilarious. They're like, what a show, right? What a ride. And they're not taking everything that seriously. If you can integrate that, this will really help soften the heaviness of that first house Capricorn, which will lead to you not having to, go through like real emotional breakdowns, which sometimes Capricorn risings will hit because they haven't been processing their emotions, they haven't been integrating, and they just hit a wall and they collapse, right? We also know 5th house can be our escapism tendencies, like it's where we kind of can overconsume, overindulge, and it's in the sign of Taurus. So you can overindulge in sex, you can overindulge in food, you can overindulge in alcohol, right? We don't want that to happen. So if you integrate that Sag 12th house, you will have a beautiful balance of like work hard, play hard, right? And you'll see with some of these examples of people who did master this. Now, the first example I have, best one, Dennis Rodman. Okay. Work hard, play hard perfectly sums that man up. I remember when I watched the documentary about Michael Jordan, and he was talking about Dennis Rodman, and he was like, everybody like talked shit about him and mocked him because whatever, he's wearing a dress and he has weird hair, and like, he's like, I don't care about any of that, right? I really don't give a shit about any of that. And like, he was like, he showed up every single day and gave it 110%, like went harder than anybody, always showed up ready to play the game, gave it like 100% effort. And that's why he's the best and was like the best teammate for him. And, there's the funny stories about, this was also in the documentary where, it was all becoming a little bit too much. It was like so much discipline, so much hard work, back when the Bulls were like winning 6 championships. And Dennis Rodman would randomly be like, you know what? I need 2 days off. And I remember in the documentary, Michael Jordan's like, what do you mean you need 2? I don't get days off. Why do you get days off? But this is what he understood. He went to Vegas for 2 days, probably went absolutely wild, blew off a bunch of steam, and then he was back on the court giving 100%. So that's the kind of energy of the Capricorn rising. It's like they need to have a balance of work hard, play hard. And if they don't get that, that's when they implode. That's when they have a nervous breakdown. They can't have too much of either. He was a 16-degree Capricorn ascendant. He was ruled, okay, so this was his lesson, Saturn at 29 degrees Capricorn, first house, okay? I think he completed his lesson. I don't know him personally, and I'm sure there's maybe other lessons he has to learn, but I think he really kind of embodied this. Like 29th degree is the critical degree, right? He needed to embody integrity, discipline, taking accountability, and showing up and putting in the work, right? So maybe in a past life, he was lazy. Maybe in a past life, he took shortcuts, or he kind of, fucked off his responsibilities. I don't know. But I know a Saturn at 29 degrees Capricorn in the first house, he was meant to completely master that lesson of like, you're going to show up and you're going to do this, right? No matter what, you're not going to make excuses, none of it. And so I feel that was a great example. The other example I have here is Ariana Grande. This was an interesting one to me because what do we know mostly about Ariana Grande? So for one is everyone talks about how she's like a shapeshifter, right? How she's always kind of like gone through these phases where her hair color was different, her skin was a different tone, she would have a different voice, right? That's, I think, what we most say about her is like, she used to talk in a kind of very normal voice. Then she kind of went through a phase where she was talking in this kind of like ghetto voice. And then now she's like, since Wicked, she's in this phase where she's talking like a really weird robot. Like, so I would say her voice, her dialect is something that is what a lot of people focus on. And also, right, that she has kind of been a homewrecker a little bit in like quite a few relationships. So let's break it down. She's ruled by Saturn at 0 degrees Pisces in her second house. Okay. So Pisces is music. So I think, second house income, self-worth, all of that. But what else did I say about Pisces? Now, so Saturn at 0 degrees here is in her second house in Placidus, right? But however, in whole sign, Pisces would rule her third house, right? So the manipulation through her voice, through these different accents and dialects, that is Pisces' third house. That is Pisces' third house. It's like a chameleon. She'll be one person and say one thing, and then she's a different person and she says something different, right? Now she has Saturn at 0 degrees Pisces here, which means she has to be in a huge amount of integrity with how she makes income. And there's a spiritual karma here. which again, I think is interesting. Just looking at the kind of discourse around the Wicked film, and that everybody seemed to be really weird after they did it, just very odd behavior. And there's kind of like, rumors of like, is the set and the movie itself kind of like tainted, kind of like a dark energy, because the original Wizard of Oz, we know there was a ton of trauma that happened on that set with those actors and actresses like Judy Garland, right? So it's almost like there's a spiritual karma here for her in terms of how she, her sense of self-worth and how she makes money and how she manifests in things. So I'm not sure if she's completed that contract, but that is a very heavy spiritual karma that she will have to, master. Now, she also has Chiron and Leo in the 7th house. That to me is the source of being the kind of like home wrecking. Is Chiron and Leo 7th house, a deep wound around not getting enough attention. And she doesn't care who she gets that attention from. And actually, it's probably even more exciting to get attention from someone you're not supposed to be getting it from, right? So that's an example of that. Another one, Queen Elizabeth. She gives very much Capricorn rising energy, right? She became queen fairly young. I forgot the exact age, but she was very young. She came in and had to take on a huge amount of responsibility, right? This kind of heaviness, a lot of responsibility, a lot of weight on the shoulders. But again, this is karmic. Now, she's a 21 degree Capricorn ascendant. That is a Sagittarius degree, right? So there's a global implication here. She's ruled by Saturn at 24 degrees Scorpio. So there's a deep shadow karma here. And of course, we know all the theories, and I don't know how, you can't say anything on YouTube anymore, but we know the theories and the lore, right? Is she human? Is she not? Dark things that have gone on in the royal family, right? That is very much Saturn in Scorpio to me. There was a real shadow contract to complete. Did she complete it? Doubt it. Now, this was at 24 degrees, the Saturn, which is a Taurus degree. So that also tells us things around money, right? We know that they basically had so much money and hoarded a lot of it. There's this, again, 2nd house Aquarius. If you're pretending to be humanitarian, it is going to come back karmically to bite you in the ass. Aquarius still has the ancient ruler of Saturn, right? So basically Saturn, when he used to rule both Capricorn and Aquarius, was once you get to a position of power, authority, status, you need to use it for the greater good. That is where Saturn's rulership carried over between the two. So I don't know that karma was completed, and it was in the 9th house, right, of global relations. The 9th house can also be a house of nobility, right? Jupiter is the rulership, and Jupiter was often associated with kings and queens and nobility. So did you transform the darkness of this house? Probably not. Did you learn the lesson around hoarding, around using negative energies and maybe dark magic and things like that? I don't know. That's for her soul to figure out. As far as we're concerned, probably not, right? Now, her Saturn was conjunct her midheaven at 25 degrees Scorpio. So this is what she was seen for, right? Now, here's another example. Our boy Epstein, right? Obviously not our boy, but one of the most famous dark souls right now. And this again, this comes with a heavy weight. This is why I'm saying you can look at some of these examples and you can see that for those who at least appear to be attempting to complete their soul's contract, to clear their karma, you can kind of see that, right? That's why I say Dennis Rodman. I think he's an interesting dude. Is he perfect? Absolutely not. But do I think he at least got very close to succeeding at his own personal karma? Yeah. Again, not a perfect guy, but I think so. When I look at Ariana Grande, no. Queen Elizabeth, absolutely not. Epstein, absolutely not, right? The devil card in the tarot, it just will keep coming back. It is a really heavy karmic burden. Now, he was a 12-degree Capricorn ascendant, which is a Pisces degree. So again, right? So go back example. Queen Elizabeth II, 21 degrees. Sagittarius being nobility, globalism, right? She was an heir to a throne of a country which has global implications and is also in the realm of nobility, right? Epstein, 12 degrees. There's confusion around how this man got into this position of power and authority. And again, this has come out with the files, right? Of how did this man, where did he get the money from? How did he get into this position of authority where everybody just like bowed down to him, right? 12 degrees Pisces, confusion around this. Now, he was ruled by Saturn at 27 degrees Libra in the 9th house. Now, remember I said Saturn is exalted in Libra. So it actually does well there. It represents this kind of beneficial karma, you could say. But it's really to be used to bring justice, fairness, balance. Saturn works excellently in Libra because they share in similar themes. Obviously, that didn't occur. Obviously. Okay, and in the 9th house, globalism, right? Now, he used this in the lower way, okay? He took that Saturnian energy and used it to make beneficial global relationships that benefited only him. Not for the greater good, right? Not for anybody's benefit. In fact, for horrific crimes, okay? 27 degrees is a Gemini degree, okay? The emails, the communications, right? The constant like sending of emails and letters and all this kind of stuff. He used, again, the malefic. It is powerful either way you cut it. He used it for the most negative thing possible, right? Again, you'll see here an example with Placidus' chart. He had Mars and Venus and Pisces conjunct in the 2nd house. Manipulation of money, total lack of boundaries when it comes to self-worth and others, a complete illusion, right? Just very interesting. And then the final example I have here was Drake, the rapper. Capricorn rising, 28 degree Capricorn ascendant, right? Which is a Cancer degree. Okay, so we know certain things about Drake, like he is very close, like with his mom. He has become very, very wealthy. 28 degrees is an abundance degree. But he is ruled by his Saturn in Sagittarius in the 10th house. So a lot of his karma was surrounding fulfilling his purpose and mission. And I think in the realm of Sagittarius here, right, it's about speaking truth. It's about believing in something. As I said, with Sag risings, it's really important to have a core sense of morality, a core sense of your personal truth and what you believe as a way, your compass for the world. That's where he had his Saturn. So his sense of achievement needed to have some sort of like spiritual moral compass. It needed to have some sort of personal truth behind it. It's also at 7 degrees, which is a Libra degree. And we know that didn't happen. And he's also been in a lot of trouble for like, stuff. And he has a lot of beef with other rappers and other people because of the shit he has said, which may or may not be true. But again, this was his karma, was to actually, again, bring in a very solid truth, right? To speak truth, to bring a vision to the world, and to kind of ultimately, I think, bring some sort of higher energy, some sort of higher perspective to the world. And I think he started out like that in a way, because if you go back to like his earlier raps, like I think he was super, unique in his style. I think he had like definitely an interesting way with words. And then over time, you just see how being ruled by a malefic is not easy. It can easily suck you in to the lower. He also has Mercury and Scorpio. So, there's a lot of factors here, but this is what I want to say to the Capricorn risings. It is such a big responsibility. It is a heavy chart, like, not going to lie, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. I think the key is that you have to really master the lesson, and never give up on trying to be in integrity and to learn that lesson and to do it right. And I also think to really engage your creativity, to really engage your shadow work as well, that those go hand in hand, and that you have such a piece of the puzzle, I'm telling you, in freeing the collective consciousness from karmic loops, from this kind of energetic enslavement. Like, if you're the devil card in the tarot, you're also the angel then, right? And the angel in disguise. Again, not these examples I gave of these really horrible people, like, were they angels in disguise? No. So let's not, get too confused here. But I'm just saying that, you have to come to a place, and this is where I think this is such a heavy archetype that, again, no excuses, but this is where a lot of these people fall deeply into the shadows. And they just fully embody it. And so the key is to forgive yourself. It's to lighten your own load, right? A lot of this is self-inflicted. Lighten your own load. There's so much supportive energy in the chart here. There really is. There's a lot of supportive energy, and that the whole universe wants you to succeed. There's a lot of spiritual help, spiritual protection, and there's a lot of physical protection. Again, you can see in the negative examples how this was used. This was used for bad, right? It was using the support of the universe. It was using the support of other people to do horrible things. Right. And in the higher, this is such a way that you're really someone who's going to help free humanity here. And so it is heavy, but don't forget to lighten the load. Sagittarius 12th house. Don't take it all so seriously. Leo 8th house. There's a huge amount of light that is within you that is really, really inspiring to the world. So love to all my Capricorn risings. Hang in there. And I will be back soon with our Aquarius risings.